What's shakin' bacons? It is time for our spoiler discussions for Avengers Infinity Wars. And to be honest, I'm not even entirely certain where to start because this movie was just such a beast of a movie. And even though it was 2.5 hours, I still think that there was a lot more they could have covered. And it also both felt shorter and longer than 2.5 hours because of how much they managed to fit into the movie, which was very impressive. So if you have not seen my non-spoilers review, go check that out now. That is the review where I talk about my thoughts and my feelings on this movie. I give you my official rating for this film off of my movie rating scale. So if you haven't seen that, go check that out first. I will have a link in the description box below. This spoilers section, just because of the sheer size of this movie, is not going to encompass my full thoughts on the film, which is why I'm referring you to my non-spoilers review, because I break down why I gave it the rating I did, where I took off points without ruining anything. Of course, if you're watching the spoilers section of this review for this movie, dollars to donuts, you've already seen Infinity War, so I think we can go ahead and proceed. However, if I need to say this, I'm about to talk about a lot of spoilers. So, if you haven't seen Avengers Infinity War, go on, scooch. Scooch out of here or you're gonna get spoiled for Infinity War. And I think to start the spoilers discussion, I want to start off with my personal theory about the end of the movie and where they're going, because before I film these reviews, I make a point to not watch anyone else's reviews. I don't read reviews on the movies. I don't want to do that because if I'm doing a movie review for you to watch, I want to make sure you're not just going to get someone else's opinion regurgitated back at you. So this is all of my unbiased, unfiltered opinions about these movies and about these topics that I talk about on my channel. So if anybody has proposed this theory or if it has come out at all, I have not seen it. This is something that I thought of after I saw the movie and I was like, I think I've discovered the mysteries of the universe. Because I'm excited about my theory, I just want to talk about it with you guys first before we get into anything else with this review. And then my theory, which is sort of obvious at first, is I don't think any of the people that vanished at the end of this movie are actually dead. One of the reasons, obviously, is that Marvel is notorious for having deaths that don't stay dead, and they even poked fun at that in this movie, especially with Loki's death and how Thor related to that from the prior Thor movies. And not only do Marvel characters not stay dead, but we also already know the lineup of forthcoming films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so that kind of gives away already that, hey, at least some of them are going to come back somehow. But those reasons aside, here is why I think that the people who vanished at the end are not actually dead, and this ties in directly with the Infinity Stones. And that reason is Doctor Strange. That was my wizard movement. Wasn't that good? I should be in the next Marvel movie. So Doctor Strange has an established character type. It's been established in his film. It's been established when he's appeared in other films. He's consistently demonstrated in his movie and in other movies that his first priority is protecting the Earth and protecting the Infinity Stone. They make a point of reiterating this in Infinity War. He made a very determined statement to Tony saying he's going to stop at nothing to save the stone. Whether Tony's life is on the line or whether Peter's life is on the line, he is not going to give up the stone for them. He's made a point of saying this. The movie makes a point of highlighting this. Not to mention, he and Tony are very similar, and so when their personalities clash, it's not like they're besties, so that makes it all the more unusual when you think about why would he give up the stone to Thanos? The answer is he wouldn't. Now, Tony doesn't quite pick up on this, I think, and that's because Tony Stark has a very empathic streak to him. Despite all of his bluster and his filibustering, I think Tony Stark is incredibly people-centric, and his first priority is to protect the people of Earth and to protect Pepper and to protect his friends, even at the cost of his own life. And because of that, he can also be at times highly illogical, which is part of what caused Age of Ultron, which was not as good as this movie, may I just say. Because of his empathy, I think that this is why Tony believed Doctor Strange when he gave up the stone in order to save Tony's life. And that was a very genuine reaction from Tony's part, which allowed Thanos to buy that that was actually what was happening. But, remember, Doctor Strange did his thing looking into the future, and he said that there was one path. See where I'm going with this? Do you see? Do you see? He said there was one path that could be taken in which there was a positive ending and in which the people in the universe were not destroyed by Thanos and by the Infinity Stones. And Doctor Strange, having already established he would stop at nothing to protect the Infinity Stones, probably chose to act in a way that would precipitate that one path to happen. So my theory is that Doctor Strange saw that the only way that any of that could be reversed is probably with the Time Stone, and probably only if Tony survived. And Thanos was about to just kill him super dead. In order for Thanos to be defeated, and hopefully for all this stuff to be reversed, and for those people that vanished to be brought back, Tony had to survive, and that's why Doctor Strange gave up the stone, because that was the only way for them to get down that path. So, I think that the next movie, here's my theory, I think that the next movie is going to have Tony. I mean, he's usually pretty instrumental with these things, let's be honest. Tony Stark is like, his film kicked it all off, and now he's become a very pivotal central character for this entire series. But I think that Tony Stark is going to be a key role in preventing or reversing what has happened. So I don't think that any of the people that vanished at the end actually are permanently dearly departed. So that's my big theory, you guys. Tell me if you thought the same thing, or if you have a different theory about what may happen or what might become of all of our vanished heroes, or if you think they're all actually gone forever. Oh my god, you guys, though, when they all started dying at the end, I had no clue what was going on, and I think it started with Bucky just going, "Steve?" And then he just kind of stumbles forward and just goes up like he does, and then everyone else started going, and at first I was like, wait, what's happening? And then I was like, oh no, Thanos did it, shoot. And then Black Panther went, and I was like, oh my god, no, we just finally got Black Panther. Although, do you guys think Shuri is going to be the Black Panther in the next one while her brother is gone? Because we don't know if she vanished or not. And in the comics, she does take up the mantle of the Black Panther sometimes. Although technically she should be like a Black Panther cub because she's playing someone who's very young. I'm just saying. But the worst, seriously, guys, this is the part I mentioned in my non-spoilers review where I bawled. It was like, to quote Scrooged, Niagara Falls. I bawled when Peter Parker vanished in Tony's arms because it was, they drew it out, right? It was drawn out, but he was like, I don't want to go yet. And he just like hugged onto Tony, and he was like, Tony was like his dad, and Peter was just her friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And I was like, oh my god, freaking Spider-Man. I think part of the reason I'm trying not to disturb my makeup because I did like green in honor of Loki and Gamora, and I was so proud of myself. I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna totally honor Loki and Gamora with my makeup. I think part of the reason like the Peter Parker thing affected me so much is I've always loved the dynamic he has with Tony Stark, and I love this Peter Parker. Like, at this point, we've gone through, in my time anyway, 3 film versions of Peter Parker, right? We had Tobey Maguire, we had Andrew Garfield, and now we have Tom Holland. And out of the 3 of them, I really think Tom Holland is most true to who Peter Parker's character actually is. He's just so, like, dorky and awkward, and he fits the character, and I love the dynamics with Tony, and I was just like, I will say that I don't think every character is going to be walking back from this movie. I do think that the ones that vanished at the end are coming back for reasons I already stated. However, I do think that some of the deaths outside of that are definitely going to be permanent. So, for example, I think that Loki's death is probably going to be permanent, especially since Thor mentioned himself. You know, he was dead before, but I think this time it might be like a permanent kind of dead situation. And there was, of course, Heimdall, which was sad to see Heimdall go. I honestly thought Heimdall was going to die in Thor Ragnarok, so I was sort of surprised that he survived that, so I wasn't surprised at all when he did not survive this film. And I wasn't surprised when Gamora died either, and that's part of the predictability score that I took off for this movie. I guessed that Loki and Gamora and Heimdall were all going to die. I think those are the permanent deaths, just because Gamora's death was so pivotal to the plot in this, and because Loki's already been brought back once, and there was a real kind of redemption moment that we had in this movie where Loki not only finally accepted his heritage as a son of the Jotunheim, but he also declared himself as Odin's son. And you could see Thor registering what was happening, and you could see Loki kind of come to that conclusion in his mind that no matter how many times he has screwed them over before, like, this was seriously gonna be it. And it was really nice that we had sort of that beautiful redemption moment for that character, and I think that was a good concluding chapter for Loki in this film universe. And for a second in the beginning of the movie, I thought Thor had died too, and I was like, no, they're not gonna kill off Thor. And Thor's gonna survive. And of course, he survived, and one of my favorite things about the Marvel films in regards to Thor is how they have this running gag where Thor always ends up with his face like mushed against a piece of glass, and he's like, and I think it's just hilarious. And as soon as Thor like splatted against the Guardians ship, I was like, oh, he's not dead. They're playing the Thor splat gag. Are you kidding me? And then he opens his eye, and my first thought was, oh look, he's pulled the space Leia moment. He's come back from the vacuum of space. But I digress. Yeah, this is getting scattered. Let me try and get back on track here with my thoughts. So anyway, that's my theory about the deaths. And even though I got all the McFeelies throughout this movie, I don't think that the people who died at the end are actually permanently dead. So now my theory is out of the way because I was super excited and I wanted to talk about it first. Let's talk about the story. I didn't think that there was any way that they were going to live up to the hype train that was being built around this movie, especially since so many films have just led up to it. And we were just getting this build up and this build up. And I was excited for this movie. I'm gonna be real. I was on board the hype train, but I was petrified. I was like, you know what? I watched the trailer and I was like, this looks like it's gonna be so good. And I did my trailer reaction. I was just worried because I have been excited for movies before and they have just ended up being so disappointing or lackluster. And the last Avengers we had was Ultron. And while Ultron wasn't a bad movie per se, like, it just wasn't great. So realistically, I was like, no, there's gonna be no way that this thing can live up to the hype that's been built around it. But it did. It was so good. The story and the characters and the villains and the action sequences. Oh my God, so good. Russo's and Eminem, you beautiful bastards, you pulled it off. I didn't think you would. You pulled it off. Hot potato to you, sirs. One of my favorite things in any series, whether it is a TV series or a book series or a film series, is when there's this huge overarching plot and it finally materializes in this glorious climax. And it unveils all of the secrets and mysteries, and it ties together threads and connects dots that you hadn't quite caught the first time. And it lets you kind of piece together things from the previous stories, and you're like, oh, so that's what. And that is a major reason why I loved this movie. Similar to why I love book series like the Dresden Files and like the Abhorsen trilogy, among others. I could go on. This was such a well-written and conceptualized, cohesive story. I mentioned in my non-spoilers review, there were moments in this movie where there could have been very large and small plot holes, or moments where the sequence of events or tie-ins or different subplots would not have made any sense. But the team looks like they thought through all of it. And there's a lot of examples that I could pull out right now, but I'm getting very long as it is, and I have a lot more to say about this movie. So I'm just going to use one example very quickly. I think a great example of this is when and how the Guardians encounter Thor. This could have very easily been like, oh, we just found Thor. We just happened to be in the very same small patch of space in the entire galaxy where Thor happened to float. And that would have been a huge plot hole just because space is so just mind-bogglingly huge. For a random encounter like that to occur, it would have to be, it just wouldn't be as plausible, I think, as, like, that would have been something where you would have been like, right. Right. But included in the beginning, as you start to enter the devastation that has become the Asgardians, which is really unfortunate because it kind of nullifies all of the effort that was undertaken in Thor Ragnarok, even though Thor Ragnarok is directly tied into this movie. Obviously, I mentioned in my non-spoilers review that I think if you haven't seen Ragnarok, you're probably going to have difficulty understanding this film, or at least large chunks of this film. But as you enter the devastation that has become the Asgardians, you hear very faintly a distress signal that they have sent out, calling for help and saying that they're under attack. And then that's how the Guardians find them, because Quill is a salvager and so is Rocket, and they want to make profit. But it's a very small touch, and it's a very small thing to think about, and I think that other directors or other writers would have easily missed something like this, but they thought of it, and I think that's just a very good example. You know, every scene and arc in this film made sense, and it was directly related to the plot. It was action-packed. The film really only had brief moments in between the action where you were kind of allowed to come up for air and take a breath before just diving straight back into it. And it was such a rollicking, thrilling ride. The humor was just enough without being overboard, without being too dark, and without being too campy. We got to see Wakanda again. We got to see what they're capable of to an extent. We got to see heroes on display that we didn't get to see previously, where they got a feature and they were kind of put on display with their talent. And there were so many tiny fun details that were included to show you how well thought out everything was. Like, guys, that Red Skull cameo, I was like, what? Freaking Red Skull! Holy crap, look at him! Oh my god, I totally forgot he had the Soul Stone. Like, that was such a good tie-in. I was like, dude, get out of here. And we get to actually see the Infinity Stones in action in this movie. And we get why they're so impressive. And we get to see Thanos in action. And we get to see why people are terrified of Thanos. You know, it's been built up that he's this crazy powerful character and everyone's terrified of him and he's bent on destroying half the galaxy through these other films, but you don't really get why, and it's fully explained in this. They don't fall into the trap of just saying, he's scary. Believe us. You actually understand why he's scary. What's really cool is I thought, like, when he uses the gauntlet and you see just how truly committed he is to this goal, the gauntlet even half destroys itself. I don't know if anybody else picked up on that. And I just think that's such a cool small detail that was added, and it was an example of many small details that were added that really added to this movie, because just like half of the lives in the galaxy were destroyed, half of the gauntlet was destroyed. And there were so many things about this movie that I loved, and I don't even know if I can mention them all. Like, the fight on Titan was insane. Had to be my favorite fight in this movie. I loved all of Spider-Man's dialogue in this movie. Like I said, I love this version of Peter Parker. I loved watching them just all work together and just unleash on Thanos. And they got so close. It was actually so good because you knew they weren't going to succeed, but at the same time you thought, maybe they could succeed, and you're just holding your breath like, get the glove off, get the glove off, and then Quill snaps and punches him, and you're like, Quill, you idiot!
How could you have done this?
And there's so many, like I said, there's so many small details, like Captain America no longer introducing himself as Captain America because he really well and truly has cast off that moniker and he introduces himself as Steve Rogers. I loved watching Black Widow's ability to just face off against Thanos' children throughout this movie. And you've got these immortal-like beings with these powers that are like super villains and super trained, and you've got Black Widow, who is just, by all accounts, a normal human, and she's just whooping ass, man. She's so good, and it really highlights the depth of her skills as well and why she's an Avenger, and I love that they threw that in. And something else I loved seeing Thanos' confusion when he went to punch Steve Rogers and he just catches it, and we all saw it in the trailer, right? But seeing it in context in the movie, and you just see Steve giving it his all and actually managing to hold off the punch. And we've already been seeing demonstrations of just how strong Thanos was. Like at the beginning of the movie, he turned Hulk into paste, right? Like Thanos is freaking jacked, and that's without all of the Infinity Stones. So now he's got almost all of them, and Steve Rogers is just holding him back, and Thanos is just like, the and it's very similar to when I think Steve Rogers tried to pick up Thor's hammer and he actually budged it, and Thor was like, speaking of Thor's hammer, I loved how they even threw in like the teenage Groot's developmental moment where Teen Groot's kind of sulky the whole movie, you know, he's just playing his hand game. But then Teen Groot has this bit of development epiphany. He sacrifices his arm to make Thor's new Stormbreaker. And when they were doing that sequence too, and this is another great example, they were like, oh, we're gonna have the dwarves make my new weapon. And I was just like, space dwarves? Like, you've got to be kidding me. Space dwarves? Like, I know there's a lot of fantastical stuff going on, but there are lines that can be crossed here, and if you bring in space dwarves right now, I think that that line might just become crossed for me. Like, this might be a little too much. But then they showed Peter Dinklage, of all people, as the space dwarf, and he was huge! He was like, I don't even know why they call them dwarves, right? They were like giants. They were giant space dwarves. And I was like, oh my god, even something that I was ready to be like, you've got to be kidding me. They actually managed to make it believably interesting. And they pulled me right back in. And it was just such a spin on the concept of dwarven crafting that I just thought was a very fascinating and interesting take on it. And I mean, even the end credits scene with Nick Fury, I mean, I gotta be honest, guys, I don't give a rat's about Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel is just one of those heroes that I've just always been kind of like, eh. But my mind may change after I see the movie that comes out for her. I felt the same way about Wonder Woman, to be totally honest. And then I saw the new portrayal of Wonder Woman with Gal Gadot, and I was like, I like her now. At least I like this version of her. My mind may change about Captain Marvel. Again, nothing against Captain Marvel. She's just not one of my favorites. But what I really liked about the end credit scene was just Nick Fury. Like, he started finishing, and it's just the quintessential Samuel L. Jackson, and he just drifts off, and I was like, you could not have thought of a better way for Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury to just flutter off into oblivion. And I've touched on this earlier, but there are so many good moments with our heroes. Like, we get to see more of Gamora's backstory because it's relevant to what's happening, and it ties in with Thanos' backstory. We got to see more in depth how Nebula was kind of turned into a cyborg as she was tortured, and it was very interesting because it reminded me of that artwork where when you look at it straight on, you see the picture, and then as soon as you move to the side, you actually see all of the disassembled pieces in 3D space that make up that straight on image, and you got to see Nebula completely split out. And it was, I mean, the context in which you see it is terrible, right? Because she's getting tortured by her father, but it was really cool to see how she was put together. And I really liked watching Bruce Banner's continued exploration of how he and the Hulk are kind of warring for control because he's trying to bring Hulk out and Hulk won't come out. So I think that Hulk is probably like recovering from the initial dukem with Thanos, and he's going to come back stronger because Hulk is one of the few characters that is able to go against Thanos. So my theory is that Hulk is pouting because he got beat and he's going to come back stronger. But in the meantime, we get to see Bruce Banner, who's more mild-mannered. We saw him in Ragnarok start to kind of take charge, and he's like, all right, we're going to do this. I'm going to start stepping up. And in this one, he goes, okay, well, Hulk, if you're not going to come out and I'm not going to get to use the natural Hulk, I'm going to use the Hulk Buster. And it was cool seeing Bruce Banner step up and not just Hulk coming out to save the day. It was Bruce. And speaking of Hulk, I really loved that moment where he's in the huge Hulkbuster suit and you just see his tiny little head sticking out and he's like super excited because he sees Thor and he's like, he's gonna kick your ass! And he gets so excited and I was like, aw, look at them, they're besties now. They're gonna be the strongest Avengers are gonna be best friends. I think it was so good. He was like, get up. And dude, Thor hitting the smackdown. I've had people tell me I'm dramatic watching my videos before, and I want you to know I am like this in real life. I am who I am on camera in reality. I am like this when I'm in the movie theater too. Just a little more quiet because I'm like, but I'm like shadowboxing at the screen and Thor came out and I was like, ah! And there was this little kid in front of me. Like our whole theater was very interactive with the movie and there was this kid in front of me. He had this like huge thing of popcorn and he was like, throughout the whole movie, and it was so fun. I had a good time. Aside from the movie being great, I had a good time just watching this kid lose his mind over how cool the movie was. And speaking of people like just like, you know, getting beat to a pulp by Thor, on the flip side, I loved watching Thanos just beat the crap out of the Avengers, which it's just kind of nice. Like, you get so used to having a stereotypical happy ending where the Avengers pull together in the last battle and they just whoop the crap out of the enemy. And in this one, Thanos just beats their ass. Like, I don't know how else to say it. They were done. And it was refreshing to have a villain just be so casually powerful that, like, the combined might of them, and even Thor busting through his chest with the Stormbreaker, could not take him down. And at the end, that line he gave was just so badass to me, where he was just like, you should have gone for the head. And then he's just gone. I was like, oh, that's sick, man. Like, it's upsetting that he won, but I was like, oh, that's sick. And it's something out of the ordinary because for once the villain won and you know that there's going to be like this really intense follow-up. So, I mean, at this point, I can't really go any longer without talking about the villains. Thanos' other children were intense. I really liked the character that, I don't even know if we caught his real name. I think Thanos mentioned it once. I don't remember it. I don't care enough to look it up. Because to me now, because of his nickname in the movie, that guy will always be Squidward. So I loved Squidward. One thing I really love about the depiction of Thanos and of the Squidwardy character is that truly powerful people don't need to prove themselves. The Squidward character and Thanos were just so casually powerful that it was impressive. Like, that guy was just like doing this and just decimating them, and it wasn't even concerning him. And then finally, you know, he gets nicked by a stone, and that's when he's like, and he kind of steps it up a notch. But the guy's just so casually powerful. He's just used to decimating planet populations for Thanos, and it was just very, very impressive to see that kind of casual demonstration of power. And I think he was my favorite quasi-villain minion-y character. And let's talk about Thanos, because I think that Thanos may be the best villain that we have received in the Marvel Universe, and I think the only one that comes close at this point would be Killmonger. I love the development that they gave him. We get to see his past. We get to understand why he feels the way he does. We get to see why he's on a quest and why he feels like he has to destroy half the life in the universe. And he's so sincere and convinced in the absolute rightness of himself and in the rightness of his ways and in his plan that it almost makes you see and understand where he's coming from. And I think that is what makes him the most dangerous kind of villain at all. It's the kind of villain that has certain and unequivocal belief and conviction in their special flavor of madness. So much so that he even sacrifices the one thing that we find out that he cares for, which is Gamora. And we even get to see him after that pivotal moment just tormented with guilt throughout the rest of the film as he leads Gamora into the trap first. And we even get to see her emotional turmoil where even though he killed her family and half of her planet, she still in a twisted way loves him because he became her father. And that emotional conflict, as she both hates and loves him and thought she killed him, that was one of the other moments where I actually got kind of teary-eyed and I was like, because they really do such a good job of demonstrating the emotions in that. They did such a good job of showing the conflict in both of them and developing that relationship. And then we get to see more of that conflict continue to evolve as he tells us about his home planet when he's on Titan talking to Doctor Strange, and when Mantis is attempting to subdue him, and you get to hear about the inner turmoil and mourning and grief that he's in. And just the fallibility and emotional range that they gave to Thanos as a character helps make him even more believable as a villain. And that only makes the story and the conflict even better. I mean, do you think there's a better villain at this point than Thanos? I mean, let me know. Tell me what you think, because I think right now, Thanos for me is he's a high point at this point, with the plot threads that tied together and with the backstory and the development and the believability that we got from him. So I think this is getting kind of long. I better wrap it up here, but I want to know, what was your favorite new villain other than Thanos? Like, which of Thanos's children was your personal favorite? What was your favorite scene? Who did you like seeing highlight in this movie, or who did you like seeing fight in this movie? What was your favorite part of this film? Because there are honestly so many parts, it's really hard to choose. But I want to know. You tell me what you think. Tell me in the comments below. And just as a quick note, if you want to support the channel on Patreon, you can even do just $1 a month. You get extra goodies from me depending on the level at which you donate. Even just $1 gets you more goodies that I don't put on any of my other social media. And if you like gaming, you can always hang out with me on Twitch as well. I am live on Twitch Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Links to everything are in the description box below. Seriously, I want to hear what you guys think about this movie. Do you think it was as cool as I think it was? Alright, I better stop geeking out now. Anyway, I hope you guys are having an awesome day, and I will catch you later.